I always feel more comfortable doing podcasts because I don't have to worry about the visuals as much, even though I run both. But there are so many things that you can go as far as details because the key is in the niche. Like the more obscure it sounds, the better. That means those people that are looking are only going to find yours because you're the only one talking about this because it's so damn niched.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Doorify Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Fagioli, back here with our resident expert at this point, Tristan Ahumada from Brilliant Tribe, and now from Why Realty. I can't wait to hear about that big shift in your life. But guys, this podcast is about podcasting. Tristan does a lot of podcasting at a very high level. You know, I'm your host on this podcast and also have a couple of other podcasts that I'm involved in. And Tristan and I were talking offline about how cool it is for people to niche down and run a podcast. And if you're listening to this, you're probably in real estate sales. And we wanted to talk to you about how that could work. You game for this conversation, Tristan?
Let's go, man. In fact, I had to just re-outline what a podcast would look like for me. So it's perfect opportunity.
Oh, well, dude, bring it. If you got that, the notes are in your head or whatever, I'd love to hear. Well, first, tell everybody just real quick a little bit about the podcasting that you've done, because I know, but I want them to know.
Yeah, so we run the Lab Code Agents podcast. I punted that over to Jeff, so Jeff Fitzer runs that one officially for us. We've run the daily real estate podcast that I do now, which is one podcast a day. It's like 5 minutes. All real estate related. And then we've done the Drunk on Social one. And we also ran some podcasts that are temporary. So we're calling it the update, which is just an update on NAR. That one probably has our biggest live, because we run it live sometimes, live attendance. We've got like 1,000 people watching live on that one, which is nuts. Because it's NAR right now. Everyone's scared. And it's not over, right? So
what you're saying, though, to clarify, it's a hot subject right now. And I think a lot of people that don't, if they're not big podcast listeners, might not understand. But like there's lots of podcasts that are on a specific subject for a really discrete amount of time and then it's over, but it lives forever.
Yeah, that one is one of those. So whenever that's done, Saul Klein and John Riley and I run that. Whenever it's done, we'll shift over to something new. And then the bigger one that I ran with Success Magazine, that one had 2 million downloads in like a year and a half. It was pretty big, pretty massive. And that's where I interviewed all of these authors, famous people, just influencers, just in general for the general population, right? Focused on their brilliance. And then the reason I was like, hey, you know what? We should really bring a piece of that back because I really enjoyed one piece of it. I really enjoyed interviewing, and this is where people need to pay attention to what they love and their niches, right? I really enjoyed interviewing professors or really great writers, but for some reason their books never took off. And after I read them, I was like, this is an amazing book.
Yeah.
So I'm starting a podcast. We already have all the people lined up to interview them. It's called Brilliant, and it's very niched. It's books you should be reading, but you're not.
Wow.
And so we've lined up PhDs from Stanford, Harvard, just book authors that you might not have known, but damn, you should be reading these books. And so that's what we're lining up. And so I had to refigure this out. I'm like, okay. Although we did run all the podcasts for Success Magazine, my team did, what do we need to do different this time? Because I don't have the magazine power, right? Nobody's just going to scan the QR code and find me, right? So we need to really think about the approach. And then we also need to make sure that everyone understands quickly what this is. So I had to outline this. Number one, what's your niche? And that's why I love what you're doing. Because it's super niche down. Like it's great, right?
You're talking about my personal podcast.
Yes. Tell me
Yeah.
about that one. So people
Yeah.
understand that niche.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, this podcast is for Doorify, members of Doorify MLS, but my personal podcast is called Certain Success. And it's really exploring my faith, the depth of my faith as a business owner. Because it's such a weird thing to like navigate the business space, but be a person of deep faith. And so you're right. I mean, it's a niche realm. Yet there's lots of people fighting that battle, and that's the beauty of podcast is, finding your people where you can just have the real conversations at some length about whatever the subject is. And well, so let's shift it so we stay on a good schedule. So if I'm a real estate professional in North Carolina, a member of Doorify, and I want to launch a podcast in 2025, and Tristan, you coach agents and brokers all over the country. So if I came to you and said, "Man, Tristan, I'm a broker in North Carolina and I want to run a podcast next year on my niche," how would you coach me on that?
Great. First, I want to know that you've interviewed people before. Is it going to be people you're interviewing locally, community leaders, or is it going to just be you talking about the current market and just getting into it? So I'd like to understand, number one, what's going to be your topic that you are great at? What are you better at than most people? Right? One. Now, and dude, this is why, like, you have a passion for it. I love this. So this makes sense for both of us, right? I would ask the agent the same thing. Where are you located? What do you love doing there? Do you love talking to people? Great. It's going to be a community podcast interviewing local businesses. Boom, you got it. Now, number two, what are you set up to do a podcast? So I have here tech and tools. And it doesn't take a lot, right? Are you going to do it in person with the people? They're going to come into your office, or are you going to do it through Zoom? Zoom's a lot easier, like you and I are doing this, right? So I would say, so you don't overthink it. You need Zoom, done. You need a good mic. You can get a Rode mic. This is a Rode mic, RODE. It plugs into the computer, so you need a laptop, right? Super easy. And then you could just use, at this point, you could use the camera on your MacBook as long as it's newer, or PC.
I'm running a brand new Mac right now, just with the
Yeah.
native camera. It
Looks great. So that's literally all you need to start off with, because you got everything. You got Zoom, which divides both the video and the audio. So if you only want to do audio, it rips out easily, right?
Mhm.
And now that you've got that,
Pro
then
tip. I don't know if you paid attention to this or not, Tristan, but one of my guys actually taught me and it's not hard, but there are advanced settings in Zoom that separate your audio from my audio, level up the quality, all that stuff.
yes, good point. That is, so they all come out at the end of the recording in separate files. So it's so much easier for people, right? That, and then once it's done, are you going to be the one who edits it? You don't necessarily need to edit it. People like the bloopers, right? So just have a good intro, and you can get that at Fiverr. You can have somebody do a quick intro on Fiverr with good music and a good British voice or non-British voice, a Southern voice. That would be a good one.
Yeah.
And then an outro. And so now once that's done, you've got to see, well, how do I post it in the world? Well, here are your options. We do Podbean. There are a lot at this point. But once you upload it to Podbean, they'll upload it everywhere for you.
So what Tristan's talking about right now, guys, is the platform that you host on. So when you record your podcast, whoever edits them, and then the files get uploaded to somewhere, and there's all these different competitive platforms. He uses Podbean. We use a thing called Buzzsprout. There's a bunch of them, or you could just go, straight to Spotify or Apple. But these networks that Tristan and I are both using, specifically, those are actually, I think that I had gotten it down to Podbean and Buzzsprout as my two choices when I did this for originally, and they distribute everywhere. So sorry, I want to make sure we clarify what that is.
Good point, man. Yeah, they distribute everywhere. You're still going to have to connect your Apple ID directly. So you're going to have to do that within Podbean, but separately. That's probably the hardest thing you're going to do. And then decide, what does my graphic look like? Again, go to Fiverr, create the graphic and the title and the name. Once you're done with that, you literally just upload it every time. Is it going to be once a week? Is it going to be once every other week, once a month? and then you're done. Now, what I would also do, because YouTube recently, maybe about a year and a half ago or so, they decided to add a podcast section. So now you can upload your whole video in there and it can run on the podcast section of the YouTube channel. And if you want to go a little further and say, well, now that I've done the podcast, I want to now edit the videos down. If you don't have an editor, you can go to Opus. Is that what it's called? Opus. It's called Opus.
Opus.pro.
Yeah, Opus Clip. You can then
Clip.
Yeah, you can then clip your videos there. Now, the challenge is if there are two of you, like Matt and I, it won't work as well because it usually grabs the middle portion. So then that's where I would go to Fiverr or a virtual assistant and then just have them clip 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 3 minutes, and then have those ready to upload. YouTube's about to change some things. So now the 60-second shorts are going to be 3-minute shorts, which is going to be great. So that's going to be pretty powerful. I would suggest you do that as well. So now that you've got the tech and the upload down in like rapid mode, so then I'd say, well, how are you getting ready for these, right? What type of research are you doing? A lot of the times we get stuck on that part. What you need to do is line up the talent if you're going to interview people. If it's just you, line up the topics. And this is where I would brainstorm with Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude or something, and just say, hey, I plan to do this. What are some great ideas for me to talk about? Because this is my audience and this is my specialty. And then you'll start.
God, aren't we just in such a different world in the last 2 years to go like, oh, I need 50 podcast topics.
I know.
Type, Well, so let's do this. So let's help them have some ideas. So, I love talking to real estate people about marketing when they have extraordinary properties. Like, of course, you're in Malibu, California, which, it's kind of, you're not going to run out of stuff to talk about just about the real estate, right? Or if you're in a beach market or a lake market or whatever. But, I think you could be a really great podcaster as a real estate professional. Just on a town or a neighborhood. So if I'm in Durham or I'm in Raleigh or whatever, like everything that's going on around town, you mentioned, interviewing local businesses or local people who have done exceptional things. Doesn't have to be a business person, could be a nonprofit or any other thing like that. But let's pick a city. So Tristan,
let's do Malibu. Let's do Malibu. So if I'm in Malibu and I want to then run a podcast, I would start looking at, I would say, hyperlocal interests. So pick your city, hyperlocal interest, meaning let's start with one and say, this is what the podcast is going to be about. Let's start today. We're going to do a real estate deep dive because I'm in real estate. I'm going to take you in the areas in Malibu that you may not know. So let's talk about Broad Beach. Let's talk about Billionaires Beach, right? Where all the billionaires are there, right? Who lives there? Let's go into why they live there. Why do most people move to Malibu when they can move anywhere else, right? And then what's the most expensive home that's sold? Then you go into Malibu's hidden gems. Like there's all these beaches that it's the second podcast, all these beaches that but did you know that there are these small beaches, and in these small beaches there are caves, and in the caves you can't go in all the time. You've got to wait until the tide comes in, and here's a website you go to check those tides. And then we talk about the artists and creators. There's some great places. If you're an art collector, you can go here. What about the car show or the car shows? You can go there as well. Or what about places to hike and places to camp? Because a big place that you can do here as well. What about the Malibu history? A lot of people don't know about that. Dude, I'm just going off of all these different podcast topics you can do. And if you want to go a little bit more lifestyle oriented, well, take a look at the food scene. These are the 5 best restaurants in this podcast that we're going to talk about and why I love them, right? Let's go. And then you're going to tag those.
This kind of crosses over into YouTube channels, but it's 2 different types of people. There's people that are YouTube all the time. There's people, I'm a podcast all the time, like hours and hours. Me too. And so you can actually have the same piece of content delivered both ways, right?
Yeah. And I think I always feel more comfortable doing podcasts because I don't have to worry about the visuals as much, right? Even though I run both. But there are so many things that you can go as far as details. because the key is in the niche. Like the more obscure it sounds, the better, because that means those people that are looking are only going to find yours because you're the only one talking about this because it's so damn niched. Right?
Yeah, I mean, so back to North Carolina, guys. Like, if you're tied to a particular golf course or golf community or tennis or equestrian or whatever, or a particular neighborhood, having a podcast that's all about whatever that niche is, and it's not going to change your life in 5 minutes. But if you go a year and put up 50 episodes and you're everything about that town, I promise you it's gonna start to convert. And another point that I want to make to everybody too is that the most important use of a podcast, in my opinion, is not lead generation as much as when somebody comes into your world and they're thinking about moving to your market or they're selling in your market, and then they start listening to your podcast, dude, they're going to be, blown away. And now you just got this constant stream of content that's feeding, everybody who's looking at what you're doing. And
That's
so,
true.
so even if it never brings in a cold outside person, just all the people that are listening to you about buying and selling are going, oh, okay, cool. This is my new information. So yeah, I think it's really powerful. And I think honestly, I guess I've been a podcast freak for a few years, but I think we're moving into a world where a lot of people are turning to podcasts for their reliable information, news and politics and all that stuff. And we don't have to go too far down that rabbit hole here, but I, for one, I'm listening to long form podcasts about politics and business and stuff like that. And you listen to somebody for 3 hours or 2 hours, you can dang sure decide if you think that you agree with their opinion or not, or, whatever. And you just can't get that anywhere else.
That's true. That's true. I mean, look at the podcast that came out of nowhere. That's now like one of the top podcasts in the world. All In. You've seen the All In podcast that came out of
Yeah.
nowhere 3 years in, barely. And that's all. I mean, you've seen the crappy video quality of that, right? It's all audio. It's mainly audio, but they've built everything off of that now. And I think we can pay attention to that as value driven, right? And so they're billionaires, right, in the business world, and they touch on different topics. If you want to emulate something along those lines locally, right? Number one, you live there, right? So you have that expertise. You already started with expertise, so use it. And then touch on what's happening there if you want to go that route, which is like maybe you circulate through what's happening today locally, right? Or the week, what's happening politically, right? Here, any news, and then real estate. You could literally circle through everything. And then every week it's the same thing. It could be that instead of just going into the community. So many different angles on this, man.
Well, guys, thanks for joining us for the Doorify Real Estate Podcast. Thank you, Tristan, for being with us. And maybe 2025 is the year of your podcast, either in real estate or in some other passion part of your life. But yeah, You got two podcast freaks here, and we'll put a bunch of show links for you in the notes. But Tristan, thanks for being back with us, man.
I'm always happy to come back.
Right on. See you back here soon on the Doorify Real Estate Podcast.